Hey everybody, I have a question for you. What's an NPC or a character that you put little thought into that actually ended up being loved by everybody at the table? Oh, by the way, it's Brian Von VA. I have two of these characters. The first one is called Bobby Gallow, an aberrant mind human sorcerer who looks like a fisherman and was inspired by one of my real-life friends. He was a character for a Session 0 one-shot, and I recently informed my friend that his alter ego became a legend in my D&D narrative world. The second one is a homebrew race illusionist wizard called Bloop. Now granted, he's not able to speak, but he has some sort of telepathy ability, you know, able to talk to your mind and his mind. One player fell in love with this character and wanted to adopt him as she found Bloop to be an orphan. She only finds her mother instinct with the creepiest aberrations. Bloop was also a one-shot NPC. I made an adult pink dragon by the name of Gil, and I got the idea of said dragon from a YouTuber called Dungeon Dad. Hi Dungeon Dad if you're listening in. Anyway, Gil would fly from town to town and do stand-up comedy at whatever the most populated tavern was. He specialized in dad jokes, so do I. I usually kept a packet of them on hand should Gil ever make an appearance. We had two bards in the game that would roleplay a competitive dad joke off with Gil whenever they encountered him, which always turned into the highlight of the session. Gil would sometimes even help them out on missions or tasks if they could out-dad joke him. I have a homebrew variation of vicious mockery that I use at my table. The damage die rolled is based on the reaction from the table. It was always a fun time, and years after the campaign finished, the players still talk about him. And they all hope I bring him back in some way in whatever campaign that we're playing. That's a good idea, and we love him for it. I was running a Fallout campaign and my players were taking the elevator up to meet a major crime boss. They decided to talk to the nameless, faceless elevator operator. Enter Bruno, a 4-foot 5-inch man doing a cliché Italian mob accent. It was love at first laugh, as I also decided he was just going to be as irreverent and polite as possible. TLDR, this crime boss was also the mayor of the city and the party killed him, but didn't want to step into a position of leadership. So they call Bruno in from the elevator, sit him behind the mayor's desk, and tell him he's in charge. What was Mayor Bruno's response? Sure, I don't see a problem with this. From that point onward, Mayor Bruno reformed the crime-ridden city into a peaceful place and became a quest giver for the party. Every time they came into his office, he was just spinning in his office chair, having a whale of a time. This one comes from my first time DMing, a pretty goofy game for my friends. This game was supposed to be a one-shot, but ended up being a 4-session campaign that was scattered over the course of a year. Now, I love to make crazy little characters, but the pair I didn't expect to really capture my boys was a pair of earrings. One was named the Voice of Reason, the other the Voice of Chaos. They could call upon them to give advice, and I intended for it to be an easy way for me to direct the party without railroading. We were playing on VTT, so as a last-minute joke, I made a picture for the Voice of Reason to be a soy jack, and the picture of the Voice of Chaos to be Giga Chad. This ended up giving us moments where they'd ask the earrings what to do in the face of a big combat, and instead of giving them any sort of sagely advice, the Voice of Reason would be like, "Oh, there's way too many. We have to retreat and tell the elders of what's happening down here." And the Voice of Chaos would just say, "Push your comrades into the lava." Why did these end up being beloved? Well, despite my game being scattered 2 or 4 months apart, every single member of the party kept remembering those 2 earrings. The laughs we had, and that's always what pulled us back into playing the next session, and the next, until the story was completed. In the finale involving a sentient explosive skull named Skelly G, an intergalactic plot twist, and a giant drill that pierced heavens. But that's a story for another day. Dr. Irving Stevenson. In my game, magical beasts and plants are appearing across Earth. Irving is a member of a zoological group trying to study and categorize these new beings. He was only meant to show up and help the players out of a particularly sticky situation due to their horrendous luck. On his person, he carries a large amount of paper and graphite, talks with an Australian accent, and likes to say, "Oh, crikey, that's a beauty." I'm still amused no one immediately caught on that I literally just dropped Steve Irwin on them. Gotta save him from a hill giant. This was from a side mission the group stumbled on while searching for the big bad evil guy. It was a kobold cult that worshipped a mimic. The kobold would willingly sacrifice themselves to the mimic to appease it. Oh god, this was meant to be a quick one-off combat encounter, but oh no, not with this group it wasn't. The players eventually convinced the kobolds that the mimic was not a god. Then they got the mimic to join their group, promising they would keep it well fed. They wanted to reform the mimic and have it become a vegan. Eventually, it became a mascot for the group. Did I mention the mimic was disguised as a giant cheeseburger? The game dragged on for 2 hours past the time we were meant to break for dinner, and I was really hungry at this point, having already skipped lunch. Thus, the Big Mimimac was born. Big Mac Whopper, Big Mac Whopper. One of the shopkeepers I run in all of my campaigns is a wild magic enchanter. One of the effects is that it's always snowing in his shop. As such, one of the players decided to make a snowman in the shop while the other players were getting their items enchanted. I decided to have a little fun and explain that the enchanter made a tiny snowman on their desk and it became animated. The players fell in love with the tiny snowman, and he has now become the shop's mascot. His name is Ploff. My DM had a noble with a distinctive emerald-colored robe show up, all as a prelude to a horror-themed session that he'd set up. I forget the noble's name, but that session left its mark. So when I ran a spin-off short campaign, I had the same noble be the one contracting the party for the adventure. Ever since, he's grown more mysterious, showing up in settings outside the original. Almost always, his appearance is a prelude to something strange, important, or terrifying happening. It was later implied that he's actually a lesser god who works to keep order in the higher planes, but myself and the rest of the players always have an "oh shit" moment when we meet a noble described as wearing strange emerald-colored robes. That would be Zashi, a little Japanese ghost girl. I helped run a West Marches server, and for my turn in the DM chair, I had the hometown invaded by a bunch of yokai, which were Japanese ghosts and ghouls, and creatures that were spooky scary, but overall pretty harmless. They just wanted to jump scare people for the lulz. A few of the outer housing places got personal ones. One got a bathtub licker, one got a bunch of tiny gremlins, one got a mold dog, and one of them was special. The special one was a group of mercenary-like PCs, a rough and tough group of cold-hearted badasses who were proud of their treetop hideaway and mostly kept to themselves. I introduced a Zashiki Warashi, a 2-foot-tall ghost girl who wanted to spread luck via giving copper coins, who spoke in a breathy, high-pitched 3-year-old's voice who paused after every 2 words, and just wanted to find a nice home. I thought it'd be funny to have the rough and tough biker gang of the town having to deal with an innocent, untouchable little ghost girl. They loved her. Somehow, this tiny little ghost with a cheery smile and a bounce to her step that fell over every time she tried to run crept into all of their hearts and turned the standoffish badasses into a grumpy family. The leader, Jenny, even unofficially adopted her as her sister/daughter with her hair-and-gone girlfriend. And the player of her even admitted that they did not expect to want to die for this precious little ghostly cinnamon bun. I have an NPC in my current campaign that I'm running who basically acts like the over-the-top, lawful good stereotype hero named the Great Gale, the Winds of Justice. Think Undertale's Papyrus meets Mr. Satan. Oh god, no. I intended for him just to be a random goofy encounter in a town who mistakes the party for the bandits, but the party loved him so much that I had him randomly mentioned showing up in a different place where they immediately flocked to him. I kept having him randomly showing up in places the party was at, no matter how improbable. He's basically the unspoken 7th party member at this point. I ran a campaign where the first boss-style encounter was a generic Necromancer cleric who'd taken over a local mine. I basically just had a name and basic description for her. I figured the party would beat her, get the info they needed, and either leave or kill her. Nope. As soon as she didn't want to talk, they stuffed her into a bag of holding. They kept her in that bag for days, constantly opening it and closing it to let air in. Someone was always on air duty. And even when she finally cracked and told them absolutely everything she knew, they wanted to keep her as they'd become attached. Kidnapping? Okay. When she started insulting them in an effort just to be killed, they decided she was pretty funny. Eventually, she ended up being a DMPC I didn't want, as they kept her around so long that they ended up giving back her equipment and helping her get back to her coven because they wanted to meet her mom. Ultimately, I had to have her run away. I mean, the party already had a cleric, but they really wanted their pet necromancer. Currently, for me, it's a blood hunter called Irving. All he did was tell us about some runes in an abandoned house and ask us to join him. Over time, my character, who was named Mori, also a blood hunter, and him got each other through the house, and we all managed to survive. When we got back to the city that we were staying in, he went off to the tavern to read a book he got from the house. Next day, we woke up to him screaming and just finishing a Crimson Rite. We take the book from him for a bit and let him tag along with us on some errands. I had the idea of taking him to the healer's house to get him rested up. Also, I hugged him because I felt bad, man. God, I fucking appreciate Irving. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Please make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know down in the comments below. What's a character or NPC that you put very little thought into that ended up being basically universally loved by everyone at the table? We love you all. Be safe. See you next time.